Audio test. Do we have any?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Ken Pritchard and Councillor Dermot Bambridge, and Councillor Phil Bignell is substituting for Councillor Pritchard. No further apologies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any from the members? Yes, hello. Councillor Darter.
For item, well, the first item 6 on the agenda, as a ward member with some history with this case, I think I should not vote or participate in the debate.
Okay, will you be retiring to the gallery?
I'll retire anywhere you want, sir.
Will you be speaking on it? No. Thank you. Item 3, minutes. To confirm the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 7th of November. Do we agree with the minutes? Can I sign them? Thank you very much. Item 4, Chairman's announcements, and it's just the standard announcements, but I'll go through them all. Members of the public are permitted to film, broadcast and report on the meeting, subject to the efficient running of the meeting not being affected. Only those people who have registered in line with the committee speaking procedure may address the committee. Members of the public are requested not to call out during the committee's discussion on any item. All speakers have 3 minutes in which to make their statement and are asked to remain seated after they have addressed the committee to answer any questions the committee may have. This meeting is being webcast on the Council's corporate YouTube channel. Therefore, could all those speaking please utilise their microphones when doing so. There are no planned fire drills, so if the alarm does sound, evacuation instructions will be given by Democratic Services. Please ensure that any devices are switched off and onto silent mode. For the benefit of the public watching remotely, I will now introduce the top table, starting with the furthest on my right, where we have Catherine Hall, the Head of Legal Services, Richard Woods, our Democratic Services Officer. I'm Councillor Stephen Clark, the Chairman of this committee. And we have, on my left, Nathan Loud, the Development Management Team Leader, and the case officers for the applications before the committee tonight. So James Patterson is the next one for item 6 and Chris Bates for item 7. So without further ado, item 6. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. I'll read the standard announcements. Members of the public are permitted to film, broadcast and report on the meeting subject to the efficient running of the meeting not being affected. Only those people who have registered in line with the committee speaking procedure may address the committee. Members of the public are requested not to call out during the discussions on any items. We've been through this, of course, haven't we? So just in case anyone missed it. Okay. Item 6, proposed pre-committee site visits. Now, we haven't got any site visits identified at this stage, but if there are any subsequent items requiring a site visit that are due to be heard on the 9th of January, such visits will be held at 10 o'clock on the 7th of January. So, and the details will be circulated to you in the usual way by Democratic Services. So without any further ado, item 6, the allotment gardens, Poundfield Road, Pottersby. Thank you. Mr. Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. So I do have one brief verbal update, which is just a correction in the report in paragraph 1.4. Just to clarify, the most recent application on the site relating to permission in principle for 8 to 9 dwellings was refused at delegated level by planning officers and was not decided by committee. So this application relates to a parcel of land to the east of Poundfield Road, outside the village of Pottersby, as shown outlined in red in the site location plan in front of you. While outside the settlement confines and therefore in the open countryside, the site immediately adjoins the settlement confines and is contiguous with the confines on its northern and western boundaries. The site is largely devoid of topographical features and is currently given over to a mixture of car parking, disused private allotments and scrub land. The site is subject to extant permission in principle for 5 to 6 self-build dwellings. This has established that the principle of up to 6 self-build units on the land is acceptable, as discussed in the officer report. So we'll just go through some photos here. So they're pretty self-explanatory. So this is a view of the access, which is between those 2 pillars. And we've got a view looking down Panfield Road from the site access. This is the access to the equestrian use next to the site. Obviously, members will have seen this from the site visit as well. This is a view across the site, looking east across the car parking. Again, this is from the equestrian access looking across the site. This is a view of the western boundary of the site, which obviously shows a strong hedgerow line there. Apologies, there's obviously a photo missing from that. This is a view towards the private allotments across the site. And again, towards the eastern boundary of the site. So the application is seeking outline permission with all matters other than access being reserved for a subsequent reserved matters application. The access would be provided via the existing entrance to the site, which would be widened to adoptable standards with a modest private estate road running through the site. So we'll just quickly whiz through the plan. So this is the proposed access. You can see here that it's proposed to be widened to adoptable standards, although the road itself would remain private and maintained by the management company that will manage the rest of the shared spaces on the site. This is just for members' information. They've submitted vehicle tracking, which highways are happy with, so they're happy with the access overall and the proposed private road through the site. Landscapes are reserved matter, but there is an indicative landscape plan which sort of roughly outlines what the proposed strategy would be in terms of reinforcing existing hedgerows and then additional planting on the southern boundary. Obviously, it's indicative, but we would expect something similar to appear at reserved matters. And finally, again, indicative because layout is one of the reserved matters, but this is broadly how it would be proposed to arrange the site. So planning officers consider that the proposed development would comply with the policies set out in the development plan when taken as a whole, and also having regards to the extant permission on the site. Officers consider that subject to the reasons set out in the officer report, the application should be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, our first speaker is Mr. Anthony Edwards, who's a local resident. Not yet, after the speakers.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I invite the members to reject this application because it doesn't comply with a number of the authority's policies and it conflicts with a fundamental principle upon which the scheme already approved was based. I'll now outline the reasons for my objections. Firstly, the planning statement for the scheme already approved for the site described that there is an established hedgerow and mature trees along the frontage with Panfield Road, and it states the site will not be dominant to Panfield Road because, of course, it's hidden behind the hedgerow and trees. However, it's no longer the case that the site doesn't dominate Panfield Road because although the new soft landscaping drawing, part of the outline application being considered tonight, shows the hedgerow and trees being maintained at the site junction. In fact, all of the hedgerow and trees at the site junction have to be removed to comply with highways requirement to construct 43-metre long visibility splays at the junction. so that this new application is in fundamental breach of a policy upon which the original approval was based, i.e. the site would not be dominant to Poundfield Road as it was to be hidden behind the hedge and trees. If the scheme is approved, it very definitely will be dominant to Poundfield Road, as evidenced by the Astrum marketing drawings being used to sell the plots on this site. How can this be right? This application is only concerned with access, and it totally conflicts with the application that's already been approved. Secondly, in their mail of the 30th of January, Pottersbury Parish Council sought clarification from the authority as to how it would verify that prospective purchasers meet all of the requirements and prove a genuine local connection to enable them to purchase plots on the site. In the final paragraph of their reply of the 26th of March, the authority provided that all outline applications would be subject to a legal agreement, which sets out the legal connection criteria to be met, as well as the involvement of the occupier in the design of the development. This is an outline application, and there's no sign of a legal agreement in it, so this application does not comply with the authority's policies. How can this be allowed? It's apparent that by a policy of dripping, the applicants are attempting to circumnavigate the authority's policies for self-build construction, policies which were put in place to assist genuine self-build applicants, probably aspiring locals wishing to afford a house in their local village.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I must stop you there. If you'd remain in your seat in case of questions from the members. Are there any questions for Mr. Edwards? No? Thank you very much. Thank you. And now we have Mr. Parkin from the Parish Council. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to speak. Pottersbury Parish Council have consistently objected to applications for self-build properties on this site since there's no identifiable local demand for self-build, and this site is outside the village confines. Members can see this in our detailed written comments. The result of our 2020 parish plan also didn't elicit any demand for this type of development. There is a lack of interest in these sites, as marketing of these sites already has reinforced. The process to grant the original PIP application was seriously flawed, since it didn't receive member scrutiny despite being called in. We consider the original decision to grant the PIP was made in error. This was admitted by Jim Newton, that the PIP application was correctly called in, but was not considered by the committee because of a processing error in the department. Had the original application been called in, we believe the committee would have been able to scrutinise the policy and raise issues, particularly since a local ward member had already identified serious issues concerning the demonstration of local connection. Local connection is vital in this, and it's in policy LH5. Because the original permission was granted without properly incorporating the importance of local connection, granting outline permission could now be seen as exacerbating the original mistake of the council. Since the original PIP application was granted, marketing material for this site has not been transparent at all about the need for a local connection. We can find no mention of this requirement in the applicant's marketing literature. We wrote to the developers about this, but our correspondence was ignored. We also informed development control, but nothing really happened. This has led us to assume that applications on this site appear to be designed with the aim of achieving planning permission in the open countryside for market housing without incorporating any local connection or any affordable element. There is no indication in this application as to how agreements on local connection should be developed. Making this a reserved matter is surely not acceptable on grounds of transparency and scrutiny, particularly given the history of applications on this site. There is also an outstanding appeal decision that when the PIP application for 8 to 9 self-built houses was rejected, and rejected by officers, as we've heard earlier. Surely any decision on that appeal will affect this application. We, Pottersbury Council, therefore call on the committee not to grant this application and would like to see it rejected.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Parkin? Mr. Bignell?
Yes, Mr. Parkin, we're talking about LH5 and the self-build and local connection. Are you aware of any residents that you would consider has got a local connection actually registered interest for this?
None at all.
You any ideas what a local connection means?
Yes, I have, and I've seen what it means, but it seemed to be vague in the policy, I must admit, to start with. But I think it's been clarified.
So how do you understand it?
Well, I understand it is somebody who has had some history of living in the local area and perhaps working in the local area. And by local area, we don't mean the other side of the district or the county.
Yes, I was going to ask you. You used the word local, and I was interested in what your thoughts on what. I mean, I've tried to work it out. I've tried to work it out myself, but I failed.
It is very arguable, obviously, but I think in terms of Pottersbury, you wouldn't consider that it was Brixworth as local.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Parkin? No, thank you very much. Now I call Councillor Ian McCord, who will speak to us as a local ward member. And of course, you have 6 minutes on this occasion.
Thank you, Chair. I invite members to refuse this application. At the very minimum, the application should be deferred until the outcome of the appeal for the 8 or 9 is known. The council is being played here. The application is for self-build, but it's a limited company. This is just an attempt to use our LH5 self-build policy to get an approval on a site that would otherwise be refused. First, we had permission in principle for 5 or 6. That is referred to in the report as being approved. That application was called in and ignored by officers, but determined under delegated authority. I question its validity, as WNC did not follow its own policies. When the PIP applications arrive, officers go to great limits to tell us that just because you have an approval doesn't mean that it can't be refused at the later stages. Now, I've never believed that, and paragraph 7.35 of the report gives the game away by stating the existence of the PIP and then says, quote, this is afforded substantial weight in favour of the application. The PIP for 5 or 6 was then followed by another for 8 or 9. That was called in by me, but was refused a year ago, and it did not comply with LH5, and we had sufficient supply. It is a blatant falsehood and has now been clarified at paragraph 737 that was a delegated one and not a planning committee decision taken against the advice of officers. Nonetheless, on the last day possible, that refusal was appealed. Today, we have an outline for an entrance and 6 properties. You should be able to see the drip effect here. Get the principle established, then increase the number, get the access agreed for the smaller number, then we'll wait for the outcome of the larger number, then use the access for the smaller number of houses with less traffic to stay there's an extant entrance with an additional traffic for 50% more, doesn't matter, and using the smaller site for 6 to dodge the affordable housing contributions for 9. LH5 is the main self-build relevant policy. It has multiple parts. Part 1 requires the applicant to prove demand from Part 1 of the self-build register. There are just 3 entries in the register that explicitly refer to Pottersbury, although I do accept there are others, like within 10 miles of Towcester, that could apply. However, one thing that this process of throwing mud at the wall and hoping enough of it will stick has been the time. These sites have been marketed for the past 12 months and more for 800,000 for plot 1, the rest at 250, 275,000 each, and they have not sold. It's rather amusing then to read at paragraph 715 that while the development would afford a form of affordable home ownership, the proposal is not acceptable, not exceptional, etc. Nothing has come forward for any of these in the past years, and I ask therefore, is there demand in a real and practical sense? Or maybe even for South Northants, 800k is not a form of an affordable home. LH5, paragraph 3, demands that applicants demonstrate a local connection. Paragraph 4 states the applicants are expected to, quote, demonstrate the ongoing involvement of the intended occupier into the design and planning process. It's also in the regulations. The report states that this will be done by a new piece of policy that officers have invented, the legal agreement. That is not policy. The outline permission is part of the planning process. If there were 6 applicants for this development, we should have at least 6 people here watching. This is not self-build with an aspirant applicant wanting their dream home. It's a developer attempting to drive a coach and horses through our policy, sadly supported and helped by a dysfunctional planning department. Policy LH8 sets that no sites of 0.5 of a hectare or more need affordable housing. This is more and has no affordable housing. Now, paragraph 732 tries to justify this and then goes on and talks about 12-month marketing. And as I've just set out, that box has been ticked without success. Should the appeal win, it will then be even bigger. But in the incremental way that this has been approached, 6 will be judged separately from the 9. There is no compliance with LH8 and should be refused. I take issue with the access onto Poundfield Road. The proposal will introduce a 5th access onto the roadway within a 200-metre stretch from High Street Junction opposite the Village Hall to Mansion Gardens. In any event, we are consenting for 6 homes or more than that. Would you say it's acceptable for 6 but no more? This is really why the committee should wait until the outcome of the appeal so we know. To conclude, there is no compliance to LH5 or LH8 and should be refused. If you don't want to do that, at least defer until the full picture becomes clear. Reject the recommendation from a planning department that we cannot rely on to act sensibly as this saga demonstrates. You, the committee, are the only hope we have of preserving some integrity in the planning process and the policies of this council. I urge you to refuse the application.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCord. Are there any questions for Councillor McCord? Mr. Bignell.
Thank you, Chair. Let's explore LH8. There was an appeal in Middleton Cheney, I believe, which allowed this to happen with no affordable housing. How did you see that, or what's your interpretation of that decision by the inspectorate?
Well, we take each one individually, so you know they're always saying what happens there isn't that relevant.
Well, I only ask because it's in the report.
It is mentioned in the report, and then it goes on to say that well, I think LH5 also goes on to say that in the event that something hasn't been brought forward within 12 months, you can then look at other affordable housing type products on the same site, which I think is where that paragraph 732, I think,
Okay.
Went into a whole load of mental gymnastics in order to try and explain that away. But the fact of the matter is, it is more than half a hectare. It doesn't have affordable housing. If it goes to 9, it'll be even bigger, and it won't have affordable housing. And you could see what's trying to be played here, which is get that and then say, but it's only 3 more, and 3 don't qualify either. So to my mind, it's just another reason that we should be refusing it and holding tight to the policies of this council, or else just allow free for all.
Thank you. Any further questions for Councillor McCord? Councillor Sharps.
Thank you for speaking tonight, Councillor McCord. You spoke passionately about this, and we have all seen these come before us over the last 2 years. And many of us have experienced the different things that you've mentioned tonight, and that is in regard to there being no conditions set in regards to a payment towards the infrastructure that will be levied towards the local area. But I would like to say, how much have you and the parish council actually spoken to local planning about trying to establish what there could be in the future for if this actually goes forward with houses for social nature?
There is another application which will be coming your way at some point in the future for 24, is it, Steve? Affordable houses, literally like diagonally opposite that site and heading down the road. So there will be enough within Pottersbury, or at least there's enough applications and another 3 self-builds on top of that one as well. So this application, to my mind, is market housing that's being disguised and crowbarred in on the LH5 one, for otherwise its location outside of the village envelope would be told it's an open countryside and would therefore be assumed to be refused. That's why I keep saying we're being played here, and it's not just on this site. It happens right throughout my ward. I've seen it, and I can see what's going on, and the PIP process followed by these sort of things, because the PIP process should be you come forward secondly then with a technical kind of reserved matters one, but they're not doing that in this instance. They're kind of going to overlay this, so presumably they can still come back with reserved matters or that for that later if they want to as well.
Thank you, Councillor McCord.
Any further questions for Councillor McCord? No? Thank you very much. Now we have Jim Rawlings, the agent for the applicant, accompanied by Kirsten Johnson, who is here to answer any technical questions that the committee may have.
Good evening, members.
Please start when you're ready.
My name is Jim Rawlings and I'm representing the applicant, Astrum Homes. I'm joined this evening by Kirsten Johnson from Astrum, as we said. I'm here to answer any further questions. It's been, the fact has been made tonight that there is an extant permission on the site, on exactly the same site for 6 units, and you can't ignore that fact. There is another application for 9 units, but that isn't material to this. You're here to decide whether an outline permission should be granted for 6 units. It would be a fair question from you to ask, if permissions already exist, why have we applied again? The permission in principle granted in 2022 is an extant permission which can be implemented following technical details consent. The constraint of a technical details consent application is that it is very inflexible and it would have to include all 6 properties within the same application. Astrum were advised by your officers at the start of the process to convert the permission to an outline consent, as this will allow reserved matters to be submitted for each property or groups of properties in separate applications. Hence the application before you this evening. You've heard this evening that there isn't demand for self-build properties in Pottersbury. The approved self-build plots have been marketed by Astrum on Rightmove, and there have been 97 interested parties. Not all of these are on Part 1 of the register, but there are a high number who are residents of West Northamptonshire and meet the local connection tests. The high level of demand in this locality is also confirmed in the council's self and custom build register, which reveals that there are 16 entries which request a preferred location that includes Pottersbury. It is noteworthy that the latest self-build and custom build monitoring report, published in December this year, and in that report, this site is relied upon as part of the supply of sites to meet the council's obligations to match demand on the self and custom build register. It would be quite perverse to refuse this application when the same site and scale of development has already received a consent from this council, albeit in a slightly different form of application. We hope you can support the application, which will allow more flexibility to bring forward the individual self-build plots in reserved matters applications during the coming year. I will just make a quick point on the local connection test and the eligibility requirement and how that's secured. That will be in the Section 106 agreement. And that Section 106 agreement can either be attached to this outline permission, should you resolve to grant permission, or the same agreement can be attached to the technical details consent if that's the way the application has to come forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Should remain there in case of questions from the members. Any questions from the members? Councillor Clubley?
Yes, thank you. Councillor McCord stated that locally there were 2 people registered on the list for self-build, and you've said that you've had interest in 97 registered and they live in West Northants. Where do they live? How close are they, those 97 to Pottersbury?
I said there was a total of 97. A proportion of them live in West Northamptonshire. I
What
haven't got the exact
proportion
number.
live, what proportion live in West Northamptonshire and in what radius of Pottersbury, please?
Well, I can offer it to Kirsten if you want to add further detail on that.
It does vary.
Could you speak into the microphone, please?
It does vary. We do have some that are as close as Old Stratford, but it does vary across West Northants.
But I would add that it's the council's own register that has 16 entrants that have requested a location that includes Pottersbury. So that's not our information, that's your own information.
How many residents in Old Stratford?
How many in Old Stratford?
Yeah. Two.
Two.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Bignell.
I have a list here and I question your idea of 1697 or anything. There's 3 in Pottersbury in part 1. And
Can you speak up, Councillor?
Yes, yeah. Yes. Under part 1, there's 3 in Pottersbury, and there's a few others, but there certainly is nowhere near 16. And that's just, I don't know where you got your information from. This is the list of our website.
Yeah, I've got the information from your website.
Yeah, well, I'd interpret it a little bit better, sir.
I think the interpretation is that the radius, I think one of your other speakers mentioned. There are obviously people on the register who have specifically asked for Pottersbury, and there are those that have asked for a 10-mile radius of Towcester. So we've looked at it, I suppose you'd say liberally, but factually there are 16.
No, there isn't. There's 3 in Pottersbury on part 1. You're getting confused with me in part 1, part 2. Part 1, which this is, there's only 3. And there's no limit in terms of no definition of the radius. So that's you making it up.
Again, I'm just going on the information that's in your register.
Well,
Are there any further
disagree.
questions? Sorry, are you finished? Are there any further questions for our speakers? Mr. Bignell,
no, so I'll defer to somebody else.
Councillor Eastwood.
Yes, I think there's some confusion here. I've been involved in several self-build locally to us, and there are several people who live over 2 miles away, registered, but have not been considered eligible to purchase. So if we've got 3 in Pottersbury, how far precisely are you going to bring people in? Old Stratford is miles away. It's not 2 miles away, it's miles away. In which case there's a manufacture of would-be people to pitch. They may be registered, but not appropriately. If there's no local demand, and as Councillor McCord has just said, where are the people lined up who would engage in this? And if I understand correctly, each unit has got to be sold independently and named before you can go on to the next stage. And if you haven't got 6, you're stuck with 3, maybe people might follow up, in which case it would be wiser to see the outcome of the appeal for 9 and see what happens. The question is, can you endorse the argument and justify the planning permission granted?
Thank you.
I'm not really here to justify the existing consent. That existing consent can be implemented. And as I said, in terms of your concerns, addressing those eligibility criteria, they will be embodied in a legal agreement. And that's as much as the council and applicants we can do.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just for the point of fact, for clarity, Pottersbury is 1.9 miles from Old Stratford.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sharps.
Thank you. You answered me regarding 106, but I'd like to ask you regarding SIL. Will there be a SIL contribution?
There won't, because self-build is still exempt.
That's correct. Thank you.
Councillor Bignell.
Can we go back, or not go back, go to LH8, which says if the site is over half a hectare, then there has to be affordable housing. How are you defending the fact that you haven't put any affordable housing on the site, please?
The site is below the threshold for affordable housing. It's 0.49 hectares.
The site's larger than 0.49. Well, I'll question it with the officer. I didn't believe it was.
Catherine, could you clarify still for us on this matter?
Thank you, Chair. The self-build can be exempt from SIL if an application is applied for and granted before self-build takes is implemented, as in the buildings are built. If that is applied for, the exemption requires occupation of 3 years from the first occupier to secure the exemption. If the exemption is not secured, it is not necessarily still exempt at that point.
Councillor Randall.
Yeah, thank you. I note that there's an appeal pending. Is it normal to have an appeal pending and then put in another application? Is that normal? I just wonder why we're just not waiting for that appeal first. Is it because this has gone in with less houses on the hope that it will get through?
Is this a question for the applicant?
Just a general, yes.
Well, the timing of this isn't ideal, I think, in terms of the, it would have been nice to know the outcome of the appeal. But, you know, the planning inspectorate and their timescales are quite a lot longer than a planning application process. But this application, the client here has every intention to implement this for self-build. It's an existing consent. What we're asking for tonight is the flexibility to engage in the design process with those parties that will purchase these properties, so that they're fully involved in the design and each can have a separate application. But should that not be allowed this evening, then the other route of a technical details consent would have to be pursued.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for the applicant? No? Thank you very much. Officers, would you like to comment on what you've heard from the speakers?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, there's a lot to go through. So I will just sort of address matters sort of chronologically as they've come up, I suppose. Yeah. So obviously we've had concerns relating to the landscape impact and loss of hedgerows to accommodate the widening of the access and installation of visibility splays. Obviously it's covered in the officer report, but obviously it's officer's view that it would still be acceptable in terms of the landscape impact. And obviously landscape being a reserved matter means that there's, you know, an opportunity to influence the landscape strategy so that it's robust and helps mitigate the visual impact. Sorry, I'm just figuring out where to go next. I think let's go to the local connection matter. So obviously, just to clarify, there is a legal agreement that's being prepared between our legal department and the applicant, which would secure the development as self-build. So that is the correct way to ensure that they are delivered as self-build. You can't do it by condition or anything like that. It has to be a legal agreement. And I suppose just turning to definitions, the definitions of having a local connection are all on our website in relation to guidance notes for the self and custom build register. And it's worth noting that there's two aspects to this. So the overall demand for self-build plots and also supply is considered for the council's whole administrative area, so the WNC area, whereas the local connection test relating to LH5 is SNC specific, the legacy area, because it relates to a specific policy from the South Local Plan. So it's not important for potential occupants to live within a certain distance of Pottersbury. It's important for them to have a local connection to the legacy SNC area. And obviously, local connection, as I said, is defined on our website. There's obviously various ways you can do that, whether it's by living within the area for a certain amount of time, having close relatives there, or if you've worked in, or sorry, are working in the SNC area. I think it's for at least 12 months. So that's worth noting. And I think we just need to revisit the extant permission. So there's nothing preventing the applicant from proceeding to a technical details consent stage to bring forward 6 self and custom build dwellings on the site. As of now, they'd be within their rights to submit an application tomorrow, which would deliver the same thing. They've, as the applicants outlined, they've obviously chosen to go for an outline application because it'll be easier for them to manage individual plots coming forwards through individual reserved matters. So that's what they've done. I think there's a few other points, but I think I'll just finish on the affordable homes. So the application form states the site is 0.49 hectares, in which case affordable homes would not be required. However, our system told me it was just over 0.5 square meters, 0.5 hectares. So I drafted the report on the basis that it was the area on our system rather than the application form. But in any case, the Middleton Cheney appeal made clear that we can't require affordable homes as part of a self-build application. And obviously the inspector said self-build dwellings were if a type of home ownership which is affordable, so it's not, doesn't fall within the definition of affordable housing, but it's a more affordable form of home ownership, as I obviously put in the report. But the decision makes clear that we can't require affordable homes, even if it is eligible to provide them in terms of LH8. I think I'll leave it there, Chair, but obviously if there's any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Questions from members? Councillor Bicknell.
Yeah, let's continue the affordable housing. LH8 definitely says it can. So you're changing policy at this point, just because an inspector somewhere came out with a decision. And also you say it's a form of affordable housing. Well, plot 2 has been marketed for £800,000. I don't know what affordable is to the rest of the people around this table, but £800,000 is not affordable housing. But LH8 says, just because an inspector at Middleton Cheney declined to go down that route, that's not set a precedent against our policy. I'm sorry.
Who would like to respond to
that? So no, we're not changing policy. Obviously, with the Middleton Cheney appeal, one of the reasons for refusal was the lack of affordable homes. And it's the exact same policy framework that's relevant today. And that's the inspector's decision, and it is relevant and should be afforded substantial weight.
Ms. Hall?
Thank you, Chair. I would just concur with that position. Obviously, we do have a policy, and there will always be case law that comes and evolves as the years have passed over a policy on our plans. But there will be occasions when decisions are relevant to ongoing matters, and that's what we have here, and that is why it's being referenced. And officers have explained why they're suggesting the weighting they're suggesting in their officer report.
Thank you very much. Any Councillor Bagot-Webb?
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 points I'd like to sort of explore a bit more. We talk about the PIP, we talk about going to outline planning permission. It seems to me, and I want to clarify this, that the PIP is legally allowing 6 houses in principle to be built. We then move on about the access, which is obviously part of this application. And we also talk about the bushes, etc., raised by one of the residents. If the PIP that was approved said the bushes or shielding needs to remain, but highways are saying in order to access the land, the bushes to be removed, there seems to be a conflict on what can be done. So you've got to widen the road, remove the bushes. But the approval said the bushes stay. How do we reconcile that confusion?
So the permission in principle deals solely with the principle of development. So, and you can't condition a permission in principle. So there's nothing in the extant permission that speaks to the hedgerow basically, and those details will come forward as part of a technical details consent stage. So there's no conflict between the extant permission in principle and then this application, which requires the widening of the access and the removal of some hedgerow. So yeah, I don't think there is any conflict between the two in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Come to my second point then. This is the legal agreements with whoever. We talk about the legal agreement with the developer. But my understanding is there has to be a direct connection with the future purchaser. And what I want to try and establish in my mind is at what point does that future owner come into the equation? We're talking about outline permission. Do you require that there is some form of agreement between the future owner to be built into this approval, or is it a condition that before you can proceed, then you need to define who the owner is? Because my understanding is the owner has to approve the plans because they are going to live there.
That's all.
Thank you, Chair. On that one, so if, for example, we deal with a legal agreement under the outline consent, it will be with the developer because they're the existing party to the application. At this point, as far as I understand it, there isn't any prospective purchasers for any of the plots at this moment. The 106 will run with the land, so it will tie the land going forward. So future purchasers will be tied by the conditions of the provisions of the 106. So if we had, for example, a prospective purchaser in position for any of those plots currently, we would be looking to secure them as a party to the 106. But if we don't, we rely then on the 106 running with the land, and the future purchasers and people who achieve additional interest in the land would be tied by those conditions. So within the 106, so there would be that. There is also the requirement, of course, for the developer to discharge that requirement before they can build the property as a self-build.
So do I understand what you're saying is that if at the end of the day the properties are built and sold to a non-local, in simple terms, then the difference is you pay the 106 or you don't pay the 106. Is it as simple as that?
The 106 will only bite when the consent is issued, and neither will bite until such time as that consent is then implemented. So you have your 106, you get that agreed, the decision notice is then issued with appropriate conditions in the normal way, and at that point, that's where it stays. Once implementation has taken part on site, then all of those matters bite and have effect at that point. So that, and then, as I say, the 106 will run with the land at that point. So if there's any purchasers coming forward, going into the future, then they will be tied by those obligations.
but in simple terms, that all 6 properties could be sold to non-locals and you just end up paying the 106 money. Is that right?
The 106 is there to secure the local connection. There's not always a financial contribution or anything like that in these matters. It's there to secure predominantly the local connection and to tie in therefore with our policy. In terms of it being sold as a market dwelling, it hasn't got consent for market dwelling, so they'd have to come back to the local planning authority if that was the position.
In order to, okay, final question then relates to local.
Could I also perhaps just add that when the reserve matter applications come in terms of the design and scale of the dwellings, we would expect as part of the reserve matters application to be some evidence to demonstrate that the occupier has had involvement within the design process.
Okay, that's all I wanted to hear. Thank you, Nathan, for that. So the final point comes back to defining local, and we keep talking about the WNC connection. We talked about 1.9 miles to Old Stratford, and I would suggest that Milton Keynes Centre is probably 5 to 6 miles away. People work in Milton Keynes and want to live in the countryside. Does that allow people in Milton Keynes who work in Milton Keynes to buy a property of such a nature? Or do you have to be linked directly to WNC, i.e. work in Toaster, for instance?
Yeah, so the local connection criteria, which is obviously on our website, it is possible for someone to obviously live within the legacy South Northants area, but work in Milton Keynes, but they would still qualify within the local connection criteria.
Okay, so if you
and vice versa, if someone lived in the Milton Keynes, but also worked within the South Northants area, they would also qualify for the local connection criteria.
So if they lived and worked in Luton and then decided to get a job in Milton Keynes, they would not qualify then because they've got no connection at all to WNC.
There is a time period for when you have to build up that connection criteria, which I think is 12 months. Yeah, 12 months.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor McCord, would you mind remaining silent while the committee is in session so that you don't distract the members who are listening to the questions that they're asking of the officers, and they need to hear the responses. Thank you. Councillor Sharps, your question.
Yeah, I just wanted clarification. I believe I'm right, but I believe that self-builds can also apply to not have 106. They can apply to be exempt.
No, they can't be exempt from 106. They might be exempt from any financial contributions relating to 106, but certainly they wouldn't be exempt from any legal 106 or unilateral undertaking which we would attach to any self-build application.
I read something different, so I think clarification is really needed on that, but they can afterwards apply for exemption. So I'm really interested to find out about that. But you know, it just seems to me that it's just another step in I'm going to build a large house, and by the way, the very end of the report is stick it down a private road with some gates, I would imagine, and then not pay anything towards the facility of services and the community. To me, that's poorly to me. But as long as we know what contributions we're getting, I think that would be great. Thank you.
Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify on that, there's a couple of issues there. The first one is what obligations might be secured with the legal agreement itself. Obviously, the first aim of the 106 is to secure the local connection requirements and tie that into the policy process. Then it will be assessed by officers once the matter comes forward and details come forward as to whether or not other obligations are then required and to be secured as well. So there'll be an assessment process at that point. There may well be that it doesn't trigger anything and therefore there won't be other obligations, but there may be. and until we have details, we can't gauge which way that would go. In terms of further down the line, there isn't an exemption, but there is the possibility of a deed of variation in the future. So, for example, if the position changes and it does revolve to market housing in the future for any reason, and we are looking into the future, so I'm mindful of that as we give this advice. But if that's the case, then there might be a deed of variation to release the affordable, the local connection and the self-build requirements, or a completely new 106 that then takes that away. So there is that potential in that respect, but the intention is that the 106 will be there to secure the local connection requirements as per the details of a reserved matter application following through the outline process on this application before members.
I think everybody here is pleased to hear that. Thank you.
Councillor Randall.
Yeah, thank you. Just thinking about the local connection. Can it go even further? Can you say local connection to the village? Because I'm just thinking, when I was on the planning committee in Daventry, we had affordable houses in a village, and they had to get to that house, they had to have a connection within that village, not within the area. So can you take it down that far or not?
Mr. Patterson?
Sorry, thank you, Chair. No, the policy sets out what it means by local connection. Obviously, we've got our guidance on our website as well, and it refers to the local plan area. So there's no policy basis for restricting local connection beyond the existing policy.
Thank you. Councillor Bignell?
Yes, can I have a couple of questions to Miss Hall, please? We keep talking about this existing consent. Now I'm getting very confused about what the existing consent is in plain, not legal terms, please. Can you explain what the existing consent is and what we're up against, please? Bearing in mind, this is outside the village boundary we're talking about.
Thank you, Chair. So there is an extant consent which has been granted in, I believe, 2022. Now the applicants, so that's through the PIT process, wasn't it? So the applicants can still rely on that one if they wish to do so. And then we're looking at tonight an outline application on the grounds that the applicants prefer this route in terms of manageability rather than the detailed PIT process because of the constraints within that process.
So under the PIP, could they build 6 market houses?
Under PIP, they can build as per the grant under PIP, subject to a detailed consent, detailed application coming through under the part 2 of the PIP process.
Right. And the second one, we're back to this prospective owner bit. It actually says that the prospective owner should be involved at all stages. Well, I'd have thought this was a stage. I'm sort of backing at what Councillor Webber to say, joining in when we've got it all half sorted. I thought this is part of the planning process, and I expected to see somebody, the prospective owners, involved at a very early stage. I thought that's what it was said on the policy. Thank you.
I think the indication is that that prospective owners would be involved in the building and designing stage. There isn't an express requirement that they're involved in the application stage, but I do appreciate that would be a helpful process, that the members would be reassured that there was some actual interest currently on the matters, but that isn't an express requirement. It simply says building and design process.
And a final one for the case officer. The applicant says it's 0.49 hectares. You in your report said it's over half a hectare. I'm struggling now.
Yeah, just to clarify, it will be what's stated on the application forms, which is 0.49.
The report was erroneous, yeah. Okay.
Any further questions for officers? Councillor Sharps.
Yeah, I have a question. Is it possible that we pause for a moment and in the recent training, it said we can pause. So is it possible that we pause for a moment and have and discuss a matter on the agenda?
I thought we were.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we were recently told in training, if you wish to pause and have a private session, we are able, as councillors, to pause and have a private session. I'm requesting to have a private session.
Is it an adjournment request then?
It is an adjournment request.
Okay. Do we have a proposal?
I would like to propose an adjournment.
Yeah, and do we have a seconder? Councillor Randall? All those in favour, please show. Those against? We'll adjourn. How long for?
I don't even know what time it is. Can we say 20 minutes?
20 minutes. 20 minutes it is. If we can all come back at 7:20.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr Woods, will you please summarise where we are?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Following the issues raised during the questions to officers stage, we've obviously adjourned the meeting and gone into private session where the committee has received legal advice on the issues that we have discussed. And we'll hand back to you, Chair, to move to the debate. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move into debate now. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, thank you for all points raised there, and I think that was an important break there. Having had that legal advice, I'm going to suggest that we accept officers' recommendations.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder? I'll second it. Who would like to speak? No? Shall we move to a vote? All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. Thank you. Those against? The recommendation's approved.
Abstentions?
Any abstentions? One over here. Two over there. Yeah. Three, is it? Right, thank you. Item 7, College Farm, Charlton Road, Ainhoe. Yeah. Yes. Comfort break for 5 minutes. You're all sitting comfortably, then we'll begin. Item 7, College Farm, Charlton Road, Ainhoe.
Thank you, Chair. This application will be brought to Planning Committee as the site exceeds 1 hectare in size and is therefore considered a major application. On your screen now is the site location plan. For a bit of context, the site lies within the open countryside and outside of any defined village boundary or settlement. And as a crow flies, it's not too far from the M40. To provide some context, 2 large industrial commercial buildings, which are the Wensden buildings, are located to the west of the application site along Charlton Road, with Ainhoe's village boundary and the nearest residential property to the site to the southwest, approximately 0.75 kilometres away. The site was originally used for farming, but the agent suggesting farm activity occurred for over 140 years on the site, although the council have limited information on the site's history to confirm this is the case. More recently, 2 buildings on site have been converted to flexible commercial use under prior approval. As shown on the existing site in terms of its layout and appearance, the traditional barns exist for appearance and use of materials. As already alluded to, 2 of these barns, known as Unit C and E, have already been used for commercial purposes and having been granted permission in 2019. You can see that in the bottom right-hand corner, highlighted in yellow. On the left is the proposed access details, which has been widened and upgraded to facilitate the development and its intensification on site, which includes passing places. Highways have raised no objections to these access arrangements. In terms of site layout, on the right-hand side, barns A and B are to be subdivided, whilst barn B is to remain as one singular unit. All units have their own car park and electric vehicle charging points, cycle storage, along with dedicated refuse collection points. Essential courtyard appearance is given, which enables turning points for large HGV lorries to enable loading and unloading, as well as overspill parking, which includes 3 accessible spaces. Again, highway raised no objection to these parking arrangements. Further enhancements across the site have come in the form of landscaping and SUDs with appropriate high standing used for the site's purpose and rural location. In terms of the proposed alterations, on your screen is barns A and B. As you can see, they retain their cultural feel with only the necessary alterations to be carried out. Likewise with barn D, undertaken reasonable and necessary changes. In terms of the proposed use and the floor space, details here are replicating what's shown in the officer report. However, for members' benefit, the proposed use class and the associated floor space are detailed on the screen. They all fall within the flexible EU class, apart from Unit D, which falls within a B8 use class. Once again, it must also be acknowledged that Units C and E also already have extant permission and are already in use. Here's some site photos. Here's from Charles Road looking upwards to the barn B, which is at the front of the site. Here is barn A, and then on the right-hand side is the section between barn A and barn B, which is being demolished. Here's site B, which fronts the site. As you can see, it's in need of restoration. So you've got some external and internal photos. Here is barn D, which is being used for B8 use class. It's already been fitted out. And just for some context, here's barn C and E, which are already in use. So you've got barn E, which is on the top right-hand corner, and barn C, which is on the barn E is the top right-hand corner, and barn C is the bottom right-hand corner. In terms of planning balance and officer recommendation, the development is considered to provide economic, social and environmental benefits using 3 strands of sustainability I've set in the NPPF, with the perceived benefits to be derived from the development clearly outweighing any negatives, with all the relevant matters being addressed within the body of the report. Owing to this, it is officer recommendation that permission is granted, subject to the conditions set out in the draft decision appended to the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions for officers? Yeah, Councillor Randall?
Yeah, are the heights to remain the same as they are now?
Yes, so the external works are purely to like improve the fenestration where they're obviously falling apart. Yes, so all the actual internal external measurements are to be replicated. Yeah, so they're all purely conversions apart from the demolition between A and B, which has been taken down because it's fallen down.
Thank you. Councillor Baggott-Webb?
Thank you. Just to clarify, it's a good report. There were no objections or support from any of the residents.
No comments received, no.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Let's move to the debate. Who would wish to speak first? Councillor Bignell.
I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation for
Thank you.
approval.
Councillor Randall, do you second that? Yeah, thank you very much. Does anyone wish to speak? No. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Thank you very much. No one against. It was unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. As I have no urgent business, I close the meeting at 7:33. Thank you all.